I hit his car with my bike and they tried to kidnap me. I am a 17-year-old male, and I just recently learned how to bike. A bit late, I know, but the opportunity never really presented itself when I was younger. I practiced on a flat road leading up to a graveyard that had a few cars every now and then, perfect for learning how to ride a bike, I guess. I decided it would be better if I rode the bike downtown instead of the same straight road so I could practice going around corners and navigating around people. I started riding my bike up the path and all was going well until I entered the back street of my main street. Way fewer people walk this way, as there are only a couple of streets and an abandoned building. I found myself in a tight spot trying to navigate through two pollards and a white car. I tried to steer out of the way of the car, but I hit it and panicked. I got off my bike and walked to the front of the car and looked into the window to apologize. There were two men in the car, both around age 20 years old and not well put together. They both wore gray tracksuits with orange and yellow stains all over them. One of them exclaimed that they thought there was a terrorist attack and someone hit their car while the other man got out of the car to assess the minor damage. At this point, I felt panicked. I picked up my bike and thought that I could get away. I rode halfway down the long street, my legs feeling weak, already regretting my decision. When the car caught up with me, they tried to drive the car alongside me, so I had to ride over to the pathway and stop. They drove in front of me, so I couldn't get past. One of them shouted, "We're gonna get you for this," and the other one got out of the car. I started to apologize as much as I could and explained that it was one of my first times riding a bike. He ignored me and kept coming closer. I just stood there not knowing what to do, what to say, what to react to all this situation. He grabbed my arm and I shouted for help as he tried to pull me towards the car. I started saying anything that would stop him, that I would pay for the damage, that I would do anything, but he kept dragging me and reached to open the car door. We were in a street by this point, and a woman had opened the door. I glanced over and started screaming for help with all of my might. She shouted at them and asked what they were doing. They both looked at each other, and then he let go of my arm, got back in the car, and rode away. The woman shouted at me to get the license plate number, but in my shocked state, I simply just picked up my bike and rode back home. I don't know what has happened to those men since then, or if that woman ever did anything else after I left. I really don't know, but it's safe to say that I don't ever want to ride a bike again. Attacked in the family home. Hi guys, please let me know if this isn't the correct sub. Thank you so much. So, about 9 years ago, making me 16 years old, I was staying with some friends, whilst me and my mom had a cooling off period after constant arguments and fights. We were too similar and were always clashing over the smallest of things. I actually stayed with my friend for about 2 months, as the calm atmosphere of the environment was good for me. Chaos and drama followed my mom all throughout her life, and in all honesty, I hated it so much. I thought I hated her for a while too. Teen angst, I guess. Towards the end of me living with my friend in a nice and relaxed atmosphere, mine and my mom's relationship started to get better. Distant makes the heart grow fonder and all of that. I texted her to say I would pop over for a visit and see how she was and if this time apart was as happy and as relaxing as it was for me. I know this doesn't seem like a normal mother and daughter relationship, but in all honesty, my mom was quite an intense individual, and this seeped into her parenting skills. She seemed weird and off with me when she replied, quite snappy and cold, to be honest. We had stayed in touch obviously while I was away, and although her mom's skills weren't to the best, they weren't even great, she still liked to stay involved best as she could to make sure I was doing okay and not hurt, which made this reply seem weird. But like I said, we did argue and clash, so I assumed she was having one of her off days, you know? Me being me, and only 16 years old at the time, took offense and thought fine, be that way. So I didn't go over and see her or reply to her cold text. I just left it. Had I just listened to my first instinct that the text was weird things, everything would have been very different. I was very stubborn, to be honest, and didn't get in touch with her for another week or so. I waited until she got in touch. I was at my friend's house doing revisions for exams when her mom came up to her room to get me. She told me my mom was at the door, but the look on her face scared me. She looked very worried and it alarmed me at the moment. So I hurried down the stairs to the front door to see my mom. She looked horrendous. Her usually long, beautiful hair had been hacked off to shorten uneven lengths. Her eyes were swollen and black and blue. She had deep cuts all over her face and neck, and bruising just everywhere. I burst into tears. I couldn't stop shaking. It was the worst moment of my life to see her like that. My friend's mom made her come inside and sit down, and was fussing over her. My mom told me on the day I had text to say I was coming over, 3 drug addicts had broken into her house and terrorized her for hours and hours. They had cut her hair off with a knife. They had lifted our TV up and broke it over her back as they smashed it over her. One of the addicts had held a knife to her stomach and tried to stab her, but my mom held them away with her legs, all the while wetting herself. It was absolutely heartbreaking and terrifying to listen to, and I didn't think it would be this hard to type it out and read it back to myself. I think the thing that breaks my heart the most, still to this day, was that one of the people holding her hostage had read my message and was going to reply to try to lure me there, but my mom begged and begged, crying and screaming for that guy, until that guy finally gave up and sent me the message that I received that day. I have never forgiven myself for not thinking more into it and just going around to the house anyways. After the ordeal, they had trashed the house and took some things and went on their way. My mom called the police and was taken to the hospital, where she was for a week, and all the while I was in selfish mode thinking my mom was a dick and how I was better off away from her. She said she never wanted me to see her in the hospital, as she knew it was an important time with my exams. As it was a small town we lived in, she recognized who 2 of those people were and was able to identify them, resulting in all 3 of them going to prison. One of the attackers was a woman with children. The judge didn't go lightly on them due to a long list of previous convictions, which we were obviously happy about. It's not often the victim of such an attack is granted such justice. I just wanted to share my story with you. Thank you for taking the time to read it. A strange person coming from the woods. When I turned 18 years old, I figured it was best to move out on my own. It isn't like I had family problems or anything like that. I really just wanted to start my life as an adult. I'd often daydream about throwing crazy parties, being able to hook up without having found a spot, you know? Always have beer in the fridge and basically just have a ridiculous amount of freedom. So, in the summer after high school, I found this small apartment complex on the south side of town. It wasn't anything fancy. 5 apartments to a floor, 3 floors per building, and 7 buildings spaced out along a horseshoe-shaped road with some woodland surrounding it. My apartment wasn't very big. Being fresh out of high school and working a low-end job as a waiter could only score me a small studio apartment. I was fortunate enough to snag one on the 3rd floor, so I didn't have any upstairs neighbors. I plan on going to college, but as some people do know, it always doesn't work out that way. It usually doesn't. After the fall semester started, and I hadn't enrolled, I started doing double shifts at work to keep myself busy. Living alone in a studio apartment can really take a mental toll on someone. Seriously, it can. Sitting around all day doing absolutely nothing, waiting to go to work can really get old after a while. Not to mention, most of my friends ran off to schools out of state, and I was the one left behind. I'm not throwing a pity party for myself, I'm just saying. Anyways, I worked these doubles all day. They were roughly 10-hour shifts depending on how busy the restaurant was. I'd come back home super late at night, way past when the sun went down, walk through the giant horseshoe back to my apartment that sat all the way on the other end, and at that point in time, I realized that college was out of reach for me, so I started saving all my money for a new car. I kept most of my tip money in a large box under my bed, and when I come home I'd pull it out, throw the money in, and then just go to sleep. Well, that was always my intention. The problem is, since I've been working so much and being just a kid, I've always wanted to try and get in some personal time by watching TV, playing video games, or throwing one of my favorite movies. I'd usually be able to stay up all night doing it, crushing about 4 hours of sleep, then wake up, rinse, and repeat. After so long, I couldn't do this anymore, mainly because I had to cancel my cable in order to pay rent, as well as pawn off my gaming system and DVD player. It really sucked for me. Movies and televisions were my life. I wanted to go to school to study them, but being an adult always had its costs. Still, even after I had nothing to do, I couldn't sleep. I'd stay up all night, smoking a ridiculous amount of cigarettes, and just stare out my window in the middle of the night. Where I'm from, some crazy lightning storms pass through from time to time, especially in the late summer and early fall. I just watch those all the time. Having nothing to do really opened my eyes to my surroundings. I'd watch the lights on the other apartments go out. I knew my neighbors' bedtimes, which sounds sinister, but I never act on anything like that. I knew all the people who like to get a late night smoke in. I knew how many people like to drive over to the Taco Bell past midnight in order to get a snack. I also knew that the entire complex became a ghost town at around 2 in the morning. There'd be absolutely nothing going on. It'd just be me, either staring out my window or smoking on my balcony. One night, I decided to take a walk. I did laps around the horseshoe and listened to an old iPod shuffle. I remember it being a rather cool night, and I wore an old hoodie with the hood up. I probably looked extremely suspicious, but honestly, I was just out for a walk. I followed this massive iron fence that wrapped around the entire complex. I was heading back home when I came across something really weird. It was a gate. It led off into the woods that surrounded the complex. I found it rather weird. I mean, the place was gated, but to have this weird gate on the side of the complex was odd. Not to mention that it led absolutely nowhere. It gave me the chills to see that it was open. I stared off into the darkness of the surrounding woodland, hoping to see if anybody was out there, or maybe someone forgot to shut it. I don't know. I kept moving. Luckily, I could see the gate from my apartment and decided I had to play a new game. Who opens the gate? After coming home from work, I placed my tips in my box, went to my window, stared out, and looked for the gate. I could see it from my apartment. It was just really hard. There weren't any streetlights around the damn thing, and it honestly looked like it wasn't even there. The gate was shut, and when it was shut, it blended into the fence perfectly. Nobody could know it was there unless they found the thing open, which I did. I didn't bother to tell anyone because, well, I didn't think it was such a big deal, to be honest. I thought somebody was going out there to smoke a bowl, or fruit some weird public sex fantasy or something like that. I didn't really care what was going on behind there, but I need something to do in order to pass the time on my late night hours. So, I'm sitting on my balcony and it's way past 2 a.m. in the morning. I am the only thing awake in the complex, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm just smoking away on a pack of times. I started getting tired and figured I'd call it a night when I heard the squeaking and creaking sound of the iron gates. The metal sounded rusted. It was rather loud from what I remember, but it was a long time ago. I lowered myself down, trying to hide myself amongst the shadows of my balcony. I didn't want to spook whoever was going into the trees. I squinted my eyes, trying to get a good picture. I could see a shadow moving amongst the darkness of the tree line, but I soon realized that whoever it was wasn't coming from the apartment complex. They were coming in. My first thought was that it was a person who maybe worked on the other side of the forest and used a shortcut through. I never saw it happen before, but maybe I discovered a new routine of one of my neighbors. I thought that until my eyes adjusted properly to the darkness around the gate. Whoever came from those trees wasn't a person that lived in my complex at the time. They were physically handicapped, I think. They hunched their backs a bit, and their arms swayed back and forth, dangling like they were lifeless. The knees of the person were bent low to the ground, lower than I could possibly imagine someone getting and still being able to walk. The movement of the body was just haunting, I guess is the right word. The sight of it alone stopped my heart. I couldn't tell the gender of the person, but they did have medium-length hair that covered a portion of their face. The person moved away from the gate, flailing around in a very disturbing manner. They mumbled something to themselves, loud enough that I could hear it. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but to be honest, it sounded like gibberish to me. I figured whoever this was extremely disturbed. I held my breath as I watched a person move from behind the building across from mine towards the one right next to it. They stayed away from the streetlights that lined the horseshoe-shaped drive. They moved through the shadows, trying to avoid being detected. I didn't move an inch. I just watched as they started to make their way to a building. As it made its way towards the front of the building, it looked over its shoulder. In doing so, they looked right at me. I don't know how they saw me, but I know they did. They were pretty far away, and it was dark, but I swear to God, I saw their eyes widen, and then they scurried off into the darkness. They didn't stand. They didn't change anything about their posture in that weird, low walk they entered with. They rushed off faster than most people could run. I blinked a few times because I didn't believe it at first. But when I heard the gate slam shut, did I really know it fucking happened? I didn't sleep at all that night. I felt like shit the next morning and had to call in for my morning part of my shift. I was able to sleep until the early afternoon, after the sun came up, and finally went to work. I ended up having to stay late because one of my tables stuck around after we closed just to have a few more drinks with a manager who they were friends with. I scored a $50 tip out of it alone, so I wasn't complaining. When I got home, I went to my stash of money in my box. I opened it up and inside all my cash remained. But a note read in some of the worst handwriting I'd ever seen. I saw you watching me. My heart stopped. How the fuck did they know my room number? How the fuck did they get in? I freaked out and started wondering if they were still around. Now, being a studio apartment, they did not have a lot of places to hide, so I checked under my bed, in my closet, and in my bathroom. They were long gone. I took a peek out my window and saw the gate closed. However, the damn brush of the woodland swayed back and forth as if someone was moving in it. I freaked and called the police. It took them a bit of time to get there, and when they did, it seemed like the whole complex came alive. All the lights came on, and everyone came out to see what the disturbance was. When I told the officers what was going on, they made me feel like I was an idiot. They didn't believe me at all. I told them where the gate was. I was too freaked out to go down there and show them myself. When they went to look, sure enough, the gate was there. 2 went in searching for the person, while 2 more stayed back to take my statement on the whole matter. When the 2 cops came back, they didn't want to talk about it at first, but they were pale as ghosts. When one of the officers that stayed back to take my statement pressed them, they finally opened up. They said they didn't find anybody, but they did find a bunch of personal items hung up in various trees around the forest. They thought it was really weird and began asking all my neighbors if they were missing anything. Sure enough, people in buildings that lined the damn iron fence where the gate stood were missing all sorts of things, but they weren't anything of value. There were pictures inside frames, a hairbrush, some books, things like that. They were odd things for someone to steal. The people of the complex were creeped the hell out. I mean, I saw at least 5 moving trucks the next week. People just wanted to get the fuck out of there, and I didn't blame them. The owners of the complex came in and sealed the gate using a blowtorch. Turns out, they had no idea it was there in the first place. They didn't put it in. I got out of Dodge when I had the chance. I didn't do my nightly routines anymore, but I sure as hell still couldn't sleep. I left all the lights on, and my electricity bill was getting a bit on the high side because of it. I couldn't afford to live in the place much longer anyways. I moved back to the north side of town, in a cheaper complex that was not surrounded by woodland. I still have nightmares about the whole ordeal, and I often wonder who the hell that person was and what the hell they wanted with all that random shit they stole. It still freaks me out that they just wandered off into the wilds. And I never saw them since.